All right, get ready, everybody, because today we're diving headfirst into the mind of Niccolo Machiavelli.
Machiavelli.
The man who gave us that ultimate guide to power. The Prince.
Yeah.
We're talking excerpts, insights, and even a few surprises from his other works.
Yeah, and what makes this deep dive so fascinating is we're not just dealing with some dusty old history lesson here.
Right.
Machiavelli's ideas, they're controversial, but they still resonate today.
Yeah.
I mean, they give us a lens to understand everything from how politicians operate to even office politics, believe it or not.
Exactly. To really get what he was saying, we got to start with the man himself.
Yeah.
It's the late 15th, early 16th century in Florence, Italy.
Right.
And Machiavelli's not just theorizing about power from some ivory tower.
No, he's right in the thick of it.
Exactly.
I mean, this is a guy who served as a diplomat, even secretary to the Second Chancery.
Wow.
He was negotiating treaties, watching power struggles firsthand. He even got thrown in jail for his troubles.
Oh, wow.
All those experiences really shaped the ruthless realism that we see in The Prince.
Okay, so he's got this front row seat to this cutthroat world of Renaissance Italian politics. Right. But then he writes The Prince, a book that basically says, nice guys finish last.
Right.
Why has this book become so infamous?
You know, it's funny. It's his willingness to be brutally honest, even shocking, that makes this work so enduring, you know what I mean?
Right.
He pulls back the curtain on how power really works, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah. And whether you agree with him or you find his methods, appalling, you can't deny the impact of his ideas. They're part of our cultural DNA.
Yeah, it's true.
It's true.
Even today, when somebody makes some ruthless business deal or a politician pulls some, really cunning maneuver, we all say, that's so Machiavellian.
That's right, that's right.
But before we get lost in the controversy, let's actually dig into some specific insights from The Prince.
Okay.
And I really want to start with his obsession with how rulers gain and, more importantly, hold on to power.
Yeah, and that's where Machiavelli gets really interesting.
Okay.
He was really fixated on the challenges of conquering and then actually keeping these new territories.
That's right.
Especially in that really volatile time in Italian history,
Yeah.
He uses the example of the Duke of Ferrara, who was barely holding on to power, against the Venetians and the Pope.
Oh, wow. So what's the lesson here? Don't just assume that you can just waltz in and take over.
Exactly.
Okay.
Machiavelli really believed that a ruler has to be physically present in a new territory, actively building their power base there.
Okay.
And it's not even just about brute force.
Right.
As stress is understanding the existing power structures, the rivalries, the alliances that are already in place.
Right.
You've got to know how to play the game.
It's like he's saying, know the playing field.
Exactly.
Don't just rely on military might. You have to understand that web of relationships.
Absolutely. And he uses a great example, the Roman Empire.
Right.
They were masters of cultivating weaker states as allies and then using them strategically to make sure no one power would become too much of a threat. But Machiavelli also warns about what can happen when you get that balance wrong.
You're hearing about the Venetians.
Yes. Yeah. They tried to play it safe by empowering the French, thinking they could control them.
Yeah.
Huge miscalculation.
Yeah.
It backfired spectacularly.
Wow.
And Machiavelli used this to show that today's ally can become tomorrow's enemy.
Right.
Especially if you haven't thought a few steps ahead.
So you have to constantly be anticipating those power shifts.
Yes.
Almost like a chess game.
Exactly, like a chess game.
Yeah.
And that brings us to one of Machiavelli's most famous or infamous concepts, the role of fortune.
Right.
He calls it fortuna.
Okay.
And it's almost like this force of nature,
Okay, so he wasn't naive enough to think that just because you have this great plan that nothing unexpected will ever happen.
Right. He acknowledged that luck and unpredictable events happen, but what separates the successful from the failures is how they respond to those shifts in fortune.
Okay.
And this is where his advice gets really interesting.
Okay.
He uses this striking metaphor comparing fortune to a woman.
Oh, here comes the controversy.
Who is more likely to be won over by a bold, even aggressive suitor than one who is timid and hesitant.
Wow.
So basically, sometimes it's better to just seize the moment and take a risk rather than wait for the perfect opportunity.
That imagery is so powerful.
Yeah.
It really speaks to that core message of Machiavelli's action over inaction.
Yes.
But he wasn't just about blindly charging into battle.
Yeah.
He was a huge advocate for learning from history, studying the people who came before you.
Exactly. He believed that to really make it in the world of politics, a ruler couldn't rely on luck or, gut instinct alone.
Right.
They had to study human nature. They had to study history's patterns.
Right.
Almost like a grand strategist always looking for clues in the past.
So it's this blend of calculated risk-taking, but also deep strategic thinking, informed by history and understanding how people operate.
Yes.
Which brings us to another key insight from Machiavelli: the dangers of relying on mercenaries.
And this is where his real-world experience really shines through.
Okay.
He'd seen these mercenary armies in action, and he wasn't impressed.
What was his problem with them? Weren't they just soldiers doing a job?
On the surface, yeah, but he saw them as fundamentally unreliable.
Okay.
More loyal to their paycheck than to any cause or any leader.
Okay.
He said that building your power on such a shaky foundation, it was like building a house on sand.
So he was all about a ruler having a strong, loyal army made up of his own people.
Precisely. He argued that a prince who relies on mercenaries is just setting himself up for betrayal.
Right.
They're likely to just run away at the first sign of trouble, or worse, turn on their employer if a better offer comes along.
And he had some pretty crazy examples to back that up, didn't he?
Oh, tons. Like, he talks about the Carthaginians,
Right.
They lost so badly after that first Punic War when their mercenaries just turned on them.
Oh.
And then there's that whole cautionary tale of the Thebans, right?
Yeah.
They hired Philip of Macedon to be their general, and what happened? He took over once they won.
It's like, be careful who you trust.
Exactly.
That's rough.
Yeah.
So Machiavelli's saying if you're in it for the long haul, you need an army that's really with you, not just in it for the paycheck.
100%.
But what about those times when you, just need more manpower than you can get yourself?
That's where his whole thing about, he calls them auxiliary forces, comes in.
Okay.
These are like armies you basically borrow from your allies.
Okay.
Often, like bigger, stronger states.
Right.
Now, this might seem like a good idea, if you're in a bind, but Machiavelli actually thought they were even more risky than mercenaries.
Hold on. More dangerous. How is that even possible? Mercenaries sound scary enough.
Well, think about it. Mercenaries, they're all about the money.
Right.
But these auxiliary forces, they come with their own ambitions. They have their own goals. So if they win for you, they might get it in their heads that they can just take over themselves.
That way.
Or, they might start making moves to use you for their benefit, right under your nose.
So it's like, don't let someone else have the keys to your castle, no matter how much you think they're your friend.
Bingo.
Yeah.
He even uses Cesare Borgia, the Duke Valentino, as an example.
Oh, right.
Borgia leaned hard on French troops at first, but quickly realized he couldn't really control them.
Makes sense.
He tried switching to mercenaries, but they were just as bad.
Of course.
He eventually learned the hard way. True power meant having your own forces.
Your own people.
Who are loyal to you.
Yeah.
Directly.
Like, Machiavelli is giving us this master class in, strategy and really understanding risk.
Right.
It's not just about getting power, but figuring out how to keep it.
Yes.
And it sounds like a big part of that is, building on solid ground.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that makes Machiavelli so fascinating.
Yeah.
Even all these years later, he makes us face those uncomfortable truths about power.
Right.
The tough choices you have to make, the careful moves you need.
Yeah.
But, while the prince really dives into securing power, Machiavelli also knew that raw power wasn't the whole picture.
Right. It's not enough to just be powerful. You have to look the part, too.
Right. Image matters.
Right.
Machiavelli was obsessed with how a prince could build a reputation, one that would make people be loyal to him, but also make his enemies hesitate before they messed with him.
It's like, don't start none, won't be none.
Right.
Okay, so what did he think were those key traits a prince should have?
Well, he starts with the stuff we usually think of, for good leadership, like being generous, merciful, honest, devout.
The stuff we want in our leaders.
Exactly, like the ideal, right?
Yeah.
But then, and this is such a Machiavelli move.
Oh, I bet. What's the twist?
He basically says those things are nice in theory, but in the real world, a prince has to be willing to toss those aside if he needs to.
Wow.
Basically, sometimes you gotta make the hard calls.
Okay.
Maybe even ruthless ones to keep everything from falling apart.
It's that whole the ends justify the means thing, right? It's like, do whatever it takes.
It can sound that way, but Machiavelli wasn't saying to be cruel or dishonest just because you can,
Okay.
He was saying that politics are messy.
Right.
And sometimes you have to be practical, even if it goes against what's morally right.
It's like, what's that saying? You got to break a few eggs to make an omelet.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, say a prince is dealing with a rebellion.
Yeah.
He says it's better to shut it down fast and hard, even if it means making a harsh example of people,
Right.
than to wait around and risk the whole kingdom going up in flames, you know?
So sometimes using force, even if it seems cruel, is actually the better choice in the long run.
It can be.
It's about stopping even worse stuff from happening.
Right, exactly. And this leads into his whole thing about how important, or I guess unimportant, it is to keep your word.
Oh boy, here we go. This will be good.
Basically, he says a prince shouldn't be afraid to break a promise if it's the best thing to do.
And his example is?
Pope Alexander VI.
Right.
That dude was famous for going back on his word left and right.
That's where that whole Machiavellian thing comes from, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being sneaky, underhanded, looking out for yourself above everyone else.
That's the one. But again, it's all about context.
Right.
Machiavelli wasn't saying to just lie all the time.
Okay.
He was saying in a world where everyone's playing games and scheming, you can't just be clueless, you know?
Right.
Sometimes you gotta fight fire with fire, even if that means bending the rules a little, you know what I mean?
It's like he's saying, if you don't play the game will play you.
Exactly. And for Machiavelli, winning that game meant understanding that people are basically selfish, you know?
Right.
We're all swayed by appearances, by promises, by a good show.
Right.
A ruler has to get that, see those weaknesses to be effective.
It sounds cynical, but
That's kind of true.
that was Machiavelli, right? Not cynical, realistic.
Well, pragmatic.
Okay, so a little jaded maybe,
Maybe.
but you can't say he wasn't right about how people work.
Right.
Wasn't he also worried about people taking advantage of a ruler? I feel like I remember something about flatterers.
Oh, for sure. He had a whole section about yes men.
Okay.
He thought flattery was like poison, something that could totally mess up a ruler's thinking.
Right.
He said leaders need to surround themselves with people who will tell them the truth,
Even if they don't want to hear it.
even if their life depends on it.
Yeah, good luck finding those people.
Easier said than done, right?
Right.
Who wants to tell someone who can literally lock them up that they're wrong?
Exactly.
But that's why Machiavelli said it was so important for a ruler to create an environment where people could give honest advice, you know, where they felt safe saying what needed to be said.
Not just what you wanted to hear.
Exactly, even if it's tough to hear.
It's about knowing that you don't have all the answers, right?
Right.
Being open to different perspectives.
And that takes self-awareness.
It really does. You know, I feel like we've been so focused on the prince, though.
Yeah.
It's like we're only seeing one side of Machiavelli, you know? It's like we're only listening to the first track on an album, you know?
Yeah, totally.
We know Machiavelli, the, like, political strategist,
Yeah.
but what about Machiavelli, the man?
Right.
Like, this is the guy who wrote plays,
Yeah.
poems, even a satirical novel, like, about the devil.
That's right, yeah.
It's like assuming a chef can only make one dish, you know?
Yeah.
If we really want to understand Machiavelli, we got to look beyond the prince, look at his other stuff.
Exactly.
Especially his letters.
Especially his
To
letters.
give you a much more, like, complicated picture of the guy.
Oh, yeah.
You see a dude who's really wrestling with these big questions about morality,
Right.
legacy, what it even means to be a good person in a world
Yeah.
that seems to reward, well, let's just say, not so good behavior.
Yes,
you know?
exactly.
So, like, paint that picture for us. Who was Machiavelli
Yeah.
when he wasn't writing that political playbook?
Yeah. One of the best examples is a letter he wrote to his son.
Okay.
And in it, he stresses how important education is.
Okay.
And not just like book smarts,
Right.
but building a strong sense of morality.
Okay.
He tells his son to study hard,
Yeah.
be a man of integrity,
Yeah.
and value virtue.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
That Machiavelli,
Yeah.
Mr. It's better to be feared.
It's true.
I'm having a little trouble picturing it.
It does seem like a contradiction, right?
Yeah.
But remember, Machiavelli lived through some crazy times.
Right.
I mean, political chaos everywhere.
Yeah.
He saw how easily everything could fall apart.
Yeah.
How good intentions, like, meant nothing if people were ambitious and willing to backstab each other.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
We'll see you next time when we'll explore another awesome topic
Yes.
and help you discover those insights
Absolutely.
that'll help you navigate your own world.